Parents, what if the biggest threat to your teen's developing brain isn't necessarily the fully nude or naked video or image that you've been fearing, but it's either pixelated, partial, or half-covered images that they keep scrolling past on their phone? Parents, a major 2020 study published in Computers in Human Behavior by Lei Han and colleagues revealed something that's actually pretty shocking and eye-opening. Young adults in this study actually reported significantly higher sexual arousal from covered or censored images than from fully nude ones. So if your teen seems glued to their device, they're withdrawing from family, dropping hobbies, becoming irritable when their phone is taken away, or showing other subtle shifts, and you've been reassuring yourself that, well, it's not even real porn, then this episode is for you. Parents, I'm Matt Bulkley, licensed psychotherapist for the past 25 years. Spent my career specializing in adolescent compulsive behaviors, particularly pornography addiction and family systems recovery. Today, we are redefining pornography addiction through this recent and the latest in brain science. We'll explore why the old definition is failing our teens and break down groundbreaking research. I'll share multiple real-life stories from my clinical practice and outline for you practical steps and clinical best practices and highly proven interventions like our Recovery Toolbox for Teens and our Star Guides Wilderness Therapy Program. And by the end of this conversation, you'll walk away with improved clarity, hope, and a toolkit that you can start using immediately. Parents, I want you to remember, first and foremost, recovery is absolutely possible and early intervention works. The teen's brain is remarkably resilient when it's given the right support. So let's dive into this. Let's start with the stats. Pornography addiction among teens continues to rise. Studies show that approximately 73% of U.S. teens between ages 13 and 17 have encountered online pornography, with the average first exposure around age 12. And many report that they think about it daily. And let's start with this as well. The traditional definition of pornography, which has been nudity or naked people having sex, is too narrow, and it actually hinders recovery. So let's move to this. An updated brain-based definition would be pornography would be any media that your teen uses to seek sexual stimulation or arousal, whether it is explicit or not. And this could include things that would seem as benign as simply underwear ads, suggestive TikToks, Instagram models, pixelated anime, censored thumbnails, tease videos, thirst traps, and so much more. So let's introduce this with a case scenario from my clinical practice. We'll call him Ethan. He's 15, and Ethan's mom had put in place some strong filters and was monitoring explicit sites. She had had some concerns about his seeking out pornography. And even with that, Ethan was still spending 3 to 4 hours a day, mostly at night and mostly on Instagram and some gaming apps. And he had become increasingly fixated on partially covered models and pixelated anime. So we're not talking about the hardcore pornography sites. We're not talking about explicit nudity or sex. We're talking about partially covered Instagram models and pixelated anime. And with that, his grades had plummeted. He'd quit playing sports, and he became highly defensive about his technology use and possession of his phone. And for him, the turning point came when we reframed his behavior around sexual stimulation and the brain's response to mystery. So once his parents understood that he was chasing anticipation, not necessarily nudity, then they could address the real issue. So parents, remember this: you're not failing if this resonates. It just simply means that you need better and updated information about the nature of how teens are seeking sexual stimulation online with things that would in the past not necessarily be considered under the definition of pornography. So this 2020 Lei Han study in Computers in Human Behavior, it tested heterosexual young adults with 4 different category images. The first was fully dressed models. The second was nude or naked models with exposed genitals. The third was covered models with genitals obscured by pixelation or mosaics or their hands. And then the fourth was underwear models. And the results were this: the covered images produced higher sexual arousal than the fully nude or naked ones did. Brain processes involve active construction. In other words, the mind fills in the blanks, creating stronger anticipation and dopamine release. Whereas fully explicit images deliver information quickly, but leads to faster boredom. And this aligns with broader neuroscience. Pornography triggers massive dopamine surges in the brain's reward system, but over time, the phenomena of desensitization occurs, which means that teens need more novel or intense stimuli. A 2025 review highlighted how this mirrors substance addiction with things like changes in the actual gray matter volume and prefrontal cortex connectivity, which affect impulse control and decision making. So we're talking about literal changes in the structure of the brain. And subsequently, since then, in years 2023 through 2025, some additional research has also indicated that early exposure to pornography correlates with higher rates of rule breaking, aggressive behaviors, and distorted views of intimacy. That the adolescent brains are highly neuroplastic, yet extremely vulnerable, more vulnerable than the adult brain. So with repeated high dopamine hits, that this can rewire those reward pathways, making things, the natural rewards, things like achievement in sports or friendships, academic achievement, less satisfying. And these findings, the summary of this is that these findings explain why mild, what we would consider mild content in comparison to extreme pornography, how mild content hooks teens so powerfully. And as we mentioned, some common signs, and this probably won't be new for most parents, but it would be excessive screen time despite limits being placed, would include declining academic performance, loss of interest in school or loss of interest in previously enjoyed hobbies, would include affective or mood changes, so increase in irritability or uptick in anxiety when devices are restricted. It would be using such content to cope with negative emotions, things like stress or loneliness or boredom or feelings of inadequacy or depression. And then, of course, secretive behaviors, which involve hiding devices, sneaking onto devices, sometimes stealing devices, seeking out Wi-Fi when it's been restricted, clearing history, using incognito mode, having secret phones. So with that, let's jump to another case scenario. We'll call him Steven. Steven's parents initially saw his behavior is kind of like typical girl crazy phase, I guess, when in reality, he was spending hours on underwear model videos and censored K-pop. And with this, the parents had noticed a withdrawal from engaging in any type of family time, refusal to eat in family meals, and would become super anxious and irritable and would be deceitful and lie about his screen time. For him, with reframing the nature of the issue around the stimulation, not necessarily seeking out nudity, but the stimulation. This helped to unlock the progress. And so using some structured tools in his treatment, the recovery toolbox for teens, engaging his parents in reconceptualizing the issue. Over time, his mood lifted, and within probably 4 to 6 weeks, he and his parents began to communicate openly about this, and gradually the family trust returned. Now let's move into something that might be somewhat of an example of a deeper escalation issue. So we'll call him Marcus. Marcus, he started with harmless social media, Instagram, TikTok, but it escalated to more extreme content due to a phenomena that we refer to as tolerance, which there is an episode on tolerance that is valuable to tune into to understand that that phenomena. But and in his situation, he began to experience literal erectile difficulties with real life thoughts, social withdrawal, and mounting shame. And his parents noticed declining motivation and very explosive arguments and conflict. And as we delved into his treatment with clinical assessment, we discovered a co-occurring anxiety, which would describe as through consistent therapy, focusing on the underlying emotional triggers, along with some boundary setting and rebuilding natural dopamine sources, including getting on an exercise program and re-engaging in hobbies. Marcus began to show a strong recovery. And Marcus's story highlights how the addiction progresses and why early comprehensive intervention can prevent years of struggle down the road as the teen moves into young adulthood, and into more intimate relationships. Well, parents, it's probably important to clarify in the therapy world what we would call clinical best practices. So in the realm of psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, often referred to as CBT, we know can be highly effective for motivated teens, for helping them to identify triggers, to challenge distorted thinking surrounding their addictive patterns, and to help build healthy coping skills. And another important concept, clinical best practice, is what we refer to as mindfulness to help manage urges, which means helping and training and teaching a teen to be able to be in the present, to be able to be here now, to be able to see, feel, and identify what is going on in the present. And that becomes increasingly important for them to help manage urges for seeking out pornography or sexual stimulation. Family involvement is crucial, especially with teens. Parents getting in the loop in the treatment process is critical. So if you're working with a clinician, make sure that you're having regular communication with that clinician and that family therapy becomes a part of the treatment process. Because shame-free communication with you and your teen about the problem strengthens the connection and it reduces the secrecy. If that can't happen, so often the teen will resort to behind the scenes, secrecy, lying to keep their problem on the down low. And when that happens, it's very difficult to get into a recovery mode. So, and then as we had covered with these case scenarios, addressing the co-occurring issues that so often happen, which are typically issues like anxiety or depression, which tend to then drive the teen into this pattern of a need for escape from the negative emotions, which fuels their seeking sexual stimulation as a temporary escape from the addiction or from the co-occurring issue, the negative emotion. And I can't emphasize it enough, but exercise is such a powerful adjunct when it comes to retraining the brain to seeking natural forms of neurochemicals and dopamine and endorphins, which in essence serve as natural antidepressant or anti-anxiety, which then enhance the neuroplasticity and provide healthy dopamine alternatives. Well, parents, let me give some practical steps here that will aid in emotional connection and what I would call best practices for parents to turn science into action. So here are some steps that I would want you to jot down and try to implement into your interactions with your teen. So, and we've kind of covered this already, but number one is to create that shame-free dialogue. So there has to be open communication about this where you eliminate the shame. So, and maybe something to this effect where you as a parent are going to say, look, I'm learning how the brain responds to certain images. And so I want to understand without judgment here. So you're putting the focus on the neuroscience, not necessarily implying that there's a moral or character flaw with your teen. That it's a focus on this neuroscience phenomena and the impact on the brain. Number two is for you as a parent to build media literacy. So what I would suggest on this is that you actually discuss this Lehan study and the categories and the dopamine effects that were found from this study with your teen, so that they understand that you're not just concocting this idea that mild content can actually be extremely addictive. Like, show them the science and have a dialogue about that. Next would be that you and your teen together co-create some brain-based boundaries. So, and this would be just simply focus on protecting their brain and the reward system. And this would be where you move into what the rules will be pertaining to their use of electronics, phone, handheld devices, internet time, websites that are appropriate, social media, and just making sure that you put some boundaries in place so that there's accountability. With that increased accountability, so often that will be enough to create the disincentive for your teen to move beyond those boundaries. And then lastly, and we've kind of talked about this already, but it's to monitor and support holistically, which, as we've talked about, this is going to range from combining these boundaries and these limits together with daily exercise, reintroducing hobbies, as much face-to-face interaction as they can get with peers and other people, trying to minimize how much online and alone time that they have, and then these open talks with you about healthy intimacy. Parents, your emotional availability, it really is the strongest antidote here. So teens often turn to seeking sexual stimulation, this content, due to loneliness or confusion about real relationships. So as a parent, your consistent, non-judgmental connection with your teen helps to reduce the appeal of the secret escapes. Well, and I've alluded to this earlier, for structured help, I always recommend the Recovery Toolbox for Teens, and you can get it in the bookstore at therapyassociates.net. It's the blue version. And this is an evidence-based, at home or in the outpatient clinic setting that you can use, that includes the Breaking Free Workbook, the Parent Guide, 101 Tips for Quitting Porn. You can use it as a parent-led intervention, or you can use it in conjunction with working with a therapist in an outpatient setting. It includes, in these 3 workbooks, specific exercises, introduction of specific coping skills, parenting tools, and a structured guide for working through a recovery process. And the parents and the families that have used the toolbox report definitely improved communication, longer freedom streaks, recovery, and real progress. So, and for most families, this is the ideal starting point to really hit this addiction head on and to move into a recovery. And when the situation is more complex, when there's been a pattern of repeated treatment failures, or you as a parent, you've simply lost any capacity to have influence in your teen's life. So sometimes Recovery Toolbox for Teens or outpatient intervention is not going to be enough. And this is where Starguides Wilderness Therapy comes in. And you can learn about Starguides at the website, starguides.net. And this would be when there is a need for an intensive reset. Starguides is a clinically supervised tech-free wilderness program in a supportive nature setting that helps teen boys process issues, build healthy habits, and rewire away from these triggers. And it really is the ultimate intervention for a reset, a digital detox, a place for you and your teen boy to get a new start. And over the last 13 years, I've literally seen hundreds of teen boys and their families return to a hopeful future after completing the Starguides program. And many of our graduates return as alumni because of the special sentiment they feel for the time they spent in the field. So parents, start with the toolbox. If you are in that position where you are needing a more intense intervention, then that's where we would escalate it to Starguides. When your home efforts or outpatient efforts plateau, or if safety or risk is a big concern. So parents, I know that the challenge is complex, but it's not hopeless. With this updated research and with your compassion and with the strategies and proven tools, you can guide your teen towards freedom and healthier development. Just take one step this week. Initiate a conversation, explore the Recovery Toolbox, or assess Starguides if that level of support is needed. So parents, share this episode with another parent that might need it. Make sure to subscribe for our weekly updates, providing you the latest in research, strategy, guidance, tips, and support in the recovery journey. And remember, your efforts matter deeply. Thanks for listening. I know how valuable your time is. I hope that you have found something helpful in today's episode. And new episodes drop every week. Until next time, lead with love and courage. I'm Matt Bulkley. I'll talk to you next time.